And good morning, everyone. It is 7:07 a.m., and we are back here on KFYO Mornings. And as promised, the mayor is with us, the mayor of Lubbock, Dan Pope. Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
Morning, Mayor.
Morning, gentlemen. Good to be here this morning.
Good to see you.
It must not have been an overly long meeting last night for the city council because you're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed this morning.
Thank
or maybe you hadn't been to bed yet. I don't know.
I appreciate that. We finished at 8:58 last night, so nearly 4 hours of fun, and it was good. We had a good day. We had started at 2 and had a good work session, a number of items in executive session. Then we had 11 public hearings last night. Actually 10. One was postponed, so around zoning cases. So there's nothing slow or nothing fast about 11 public hearings. Yeah. So it's a good meeting.
Some of those zoning hearings, of course, are interesting because you get to see the breakdowns of the city maps, the lots, what previous P&Z commissions and city councils have done as far as creating the city. As far as the plots and where the commercial land is going to be and so on and so forth, and I don't know. I guess for me, I don't find it as boring as some other people might when you have a bunch of the zoning hearings and things like that.
I don't find it boring. Each one stands on its own, and they take time. And state law prescribes that you have a public hearing before you consider it, and they require a couple readings. So you have to 2 meetings and. At least 2 readings. Today we're dealing probably with more zoning cases than we will in the future after we're updating our land use plan, and hopefully, since it's not been updated in 30 years, hopefully 30 plus years, hopefully we will have a plan that will have a better blueprint for development and fewer exceptions. So we generally deal with that those zoning changes, and often they're the exceptions, and so they go to P&Z and then come to us, but it's a big part of what we do.
Have you received any comments behind the scenes or any businesses asking you about possibly updating the sign ordinance?
There's certainly been some discussion about it, yes.
Particularly to allow maybe larger commercial signs in town or along the loop and the Marcia Sharp and so on and so forth. Just because obviously, if you go to Lubbock, Dallas, for example, I mean, you have the larger billboards, large giant signs, going 50 feet in the air or whatever for some gas stations on the interstate and things like that. I mean, I don't think we'd go that big here, but then again, with more businesses and everything else, and I would think that some businesses would want to be able to have larger signage. With the higher, just more businesses in town, it's more competitive now. You got to stand out.
Yeah, I generally don't think a sign is what gets somebody to come to your business. That was never my opinion about that. I think I've heard you guys talking about this. I'm glad we're going to get a chance to talk about it. I generally think our sign ordinance has been very effective. It's been, Dave, you remember the history better than I do, but it's been around. The sign ordinance itself is 40 years old. It was tested. There were a number of legal challenges in that first decade. There was a period of time given for signs to be brought in compliance. And my recollection, I was certainly not following city government, but going back and following the history, it was our sign ordinance was tested to the state Supreme Court and held up. It's not perfect. It probably could use a relook, particularly around how we might handle digital signs. Mm-hmm. I think it's worth potentially doing that. I like where we are with billboards. I like the limited number of billboards. I find that there's sufficient numbers. I think that we have billboards on many on our thoroughfares and on many of our big corners, major intersections. I was driving home from New Mexico a couple weekends ago and came through Clovis and was just reminded of how not to do it. And I think you look at Amarillo and you see, in my opinion, how not to do it. It's just there's I think it goes past advertisement, and I think it becomes clutter. And so I generally support where we are on the sign ordinance. I think we've got You've got Loop 88 coming, and there'll be, you'll have billboards along Loop 88. I think there's certain places where they're zoned appropriately, and you've already got billboards along 130th today, and those those will be certainly or they're in the city, or I think some of them are, not all of that street's in the city, but a good part of it is now. But that's where I am on the.
Well,
on the
that's been part of my business for 40 years
Sure.
here in Lubbock. Is sign ordinance, or the signs, of course, has been a big part of it.
Yeah.
And the issue I have with it is whether or not you're promoting commerce or whether you're not. And in my opinion, Lubbock could, particularly on the interstate and places like that, where you have traffic that is passing through Lubbock, if you don't have a number of billboards that say, stay at our hotel, the Ramada Inn, next exit, eat at our restaurant, next exit, what you're in effect doing is sending a message to these people is, there's nothing here for you to see, move along, move along. And I think that's the sub-message that probably a lot of people get when they come through Lubbock, because unlike most of the other cities, they have a lot of billboards that promote a lot of commerce.
Yeah, well, I don't agree. I mean, I think we've got plenty of billboards coming into town, but I'm on the other side of that one. I bought outdoor advertising. I ran a business locally for 20 years. I believe in the value of it. I bought advertising and bought billboards, and so I'm not against it. That's not my point. I just think we've got sufficient numbers of billboards, and the interstate's ugly enough as it is. We've got problems with trying to beautify the interstate. If we could get TxDOT to take, to water what we've already got there,
Well, there's some ugly beside the interstate that should be torn down. No doubt about that.
Going to the other part of the zoning, just right quick before we hit the break,
Sure.
Mayor, you had mentioned to us before we started that brew pubs were discussed as part of last night's meeting. Can you briefly go into that?
Right. We don't have we don't specifically call out brew pubs or microbreweries or micro wineries. There's a number of different similar kind of names for those type of establishments. We don't call those out in our zoning code. So it's, in essence, really it is adding that to the zoning code. We've got several that operate today, but they operate Triple J, which was, I guess, originally was it Lubbock Brewery originally? I can't remember if that's not the right name. But then you've got BJ's actually on the Loop. You've got the Lubbock LBK Brewery in the Pioneer Hotel building. You've got 2 or 3 more under development. So it's just to add that to the zoning code. And
Well, they're becoming very popular.
they are. In fact,
They have been for a while.
They have been. In fact, it was interesting. I was reading the news clips yesterday morning in Frisco. The Frisco City Council was considering the exact same thing last night at the brew pub kind of. So I think probably the most comment we had around it last night was around parking, and particularly in our dense, in our more dense parts of the city, the central business district, downtown, and how you handle parking, and are you willing to allow less parking, and we've already got some special parking requirements or allowances in what we call in the entertainment district, the depot district today, but we had some discussions around that. There's a little bit of cleanup in that ordinance change that we'll do, but I think that we'll work on between last night and the second reading in 2 weeks.
Right. A few meetings ago, last month, you had made a comment on parking, and I'm hoping I'm paraphrasing your quote correctly here on this, where you had said for downtown, the people going to downtown have to change their expectations on parking, where you essentially said you're not going to be able to park in front of, I think you were mentioning a restaurant or a business or something like that, to where people may have to walk. I think the main part of the comment you're trying to make was, or point you're trying to make was, people are going to have to be prepared to walk a block or 2 or 3 in downtown. When we come back from the break, could you?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, talk about it.
I made a comment last night too, so I look forward to talking about it.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be right back after this.
Lubbock Mayor Dan Pope with us on KFYO.
Oh, life can be funny.
That's right.
Jeez.
Oh, geez.
Unless you're the mayor.
We are back here, KFYO Mornings. Dave King and Rob Snyder filling in for Matt Martin, and we have some inside baseball stuff that we're laughing about off mic. But now, the mayor, you asked the mayor a question about parking in downtown Lubbock before we went to break.
Yeah, my comment, I made it again last night, it's just that expectation that as downtown develops and as there's more and more commerce, more places to eat, to go enjoy a drink, to listen to music, you're probably not going to be able to park at the front door, and it's going to, you'll park and walk like you do in Dallas or Austin or Chicago if you're there. In fact, many times you don't even take your car; you take an Uber there, and I would suggest that's probably, if you're going to be drinking, that's probably a better idea. So
no doubt
that was just my comment about it, and I think the reality of that is starting to soak in. But we have a lot of folks that expect they could drive their truck to the front door, and if you're going to the Cactus Theater, you don't park at the front door. Unless you happen to get really lucky, or Triple J across the street, you're going to park in one of their parking lots and walk. And you've been doing that for a decade.
Yeah, that's
what's been some of the business reaction to that with downtown's growth? I mean, are the businesses okay with that, or are they trying to work with the city on creating more parking? Or
yeah, so I think the entertainment district folks understand it. I think probably it's more your 8 to 5 businesses that have concerns around it, and I think they're certainly, one of the things, our considerations around Citizens Tower is making sure that we have enough surface parking, so we're not taking street parking, and we've done that. Yeah. We've got enough spaces. That will be an additive to downtown parking after 5, is we'll have several hundred spaces of parking that'll be available for people to park there when Citizens Tower is closed. So
you tore down the old parking lot.
We did.
Yes.
Are
you going to go back and build another parking garage there?
Not in the plans right now. I mean, I think there could be a day in the future where if we had a demand for it that you might put a deck on it, but that's not parking structures are convenient but very expensive. About $14,000 a space is generally what they cost.
Well, not just that, but then you have security concerns as well
right.
with the structure and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So, Dave, you want to hit a few text messages right quick there?
Yeah. Get Paul to come back in next week. We like Paul. He's knowledgeable.
Okay. By the way, if you want to send us a text, 806.
Is that comment? Is that against Rob or against me?
Probably both of us.
Okay.
I don't know if Paul is knowledgeable, but he has an opinion. That's for darn sure. Will the mayor be leading area mayors to Austin during the next legislative session as he did last season? If so, what are the group's goals, and do Lubbock residents finance those trips, Mayor?
So we meet next Wednesday in San Angelo. The mayors of Amarillo, Midland, Odessa, San Angelo, Abilene, Big Spring, and Lubbock. We will talk. We'll start talking about our legislative agendas. Actually, we meet in 2 weeks. 3 weeks, the 15th of August. And we will be, I think, very, very much active during the legislative session. And yes, when I go down there on city business, it's paid for by the city. If it's personal business, it's paid for by me. So
yeah. Another texter says, Mr. Mayor, I humbly disagree about the sign ordinance. Good example, going down I-27, you can barely see business signs at or on the side due to their height, very minimum. You need to allow for signs like the one showing the business names and what exit they are on, giving the business owners a little extra business.
I think I'm fully supportive of that. In fact, I don't know why we don't have that today. In fact, I was traveling recently somewhere where I was. I had a meeting in Colorado, and I was driving through Denver and had missed lunch, and I enjoyed those signs. I took advantage of those signs, and I think that's a great way to do it myself.
Well, and if I remember correctly, didn't the Lubbock Chamber of Commerce have to pay TxDOT to put the ones in along the loop a few years ago? The blue business signs that tell you, lodging, food, et cetera. So
probably, I mean, I think those signs. I think the signs like the texture was speaking of, the restaurant or the business would pay for those. I'll check on that. I don't know
I'll bet the business has to pay.
I have a meeting with them.
And those are very handy.
I think they are, and I agree. I think it's a good compromise. I have a meeting at TxDOT with the Steve Warren next week. I'll ask about that.
Okay, another texter says, how about trolleys for downtown, Mr. Mayor?
I think trolleys are fine as long as they're on four wheels. I think, we've got trolleys that we own that are part of our city bus fleet. Otherwise, I think we're a long way from trolleys.
You're not going to be like the Seattle mayor that bought
No.
$50-some-odd million worth of trolleys that don't fit the track.
This is not Seattle, Dave.
We have tape measures here.
That's right. More coming up with Mayor Dan Pope after the news on KFYO.
News Talk, 95.1 FM, 790 AM. This is KFYO Mornings. Dave King and Rob Snyder filling in for the vacationing Matt Martin. And we have the mayor with us this morning, Mayor Dan Pope from, of course, the Lubbock mayor. And we were taking some text messages, and we did get a flurry of them. And here's one that says, when did the city council start making laws? Texas Constitution says legislature makes laws. What do you say, Mayor?
It's just somebody being nitpicky.
Well, there's certainly we're a home rule city. There's certain things we do, we are responsible for, and there's certain things that legislators are responsible for, and there's certain things that the federal government's responsible for. We try hard to stay in our lane.
Yeah, and on the signs, and I like this idea. It says we need to have a tiered system, one for throughways like Marcia Sharp, the interstate, the loop, and then keep the current sign ordinance for the rest of the city.
It's in some ways that we have more, maybe save the interstate, but we have more on your thoroughfares and your freeways. You do have more signage. I don't know that the existing sign ordinance to that detail to understand if it calls out as sort of a tiered kind of a process. I don't believe it does.
One of the things, Mayor, that you said the council discussed last night was police substations.
Yeah.
If you want to take a moment and get into that.
Yeah, so we're going to have 3 of them with the new public safety solution we hired at our meeting before last night. We hired a local architecture and engineering firm to help design those, and so that effort's underway. We've one of the locations is identified. It's going to be at Martin Luther King and 19th Street. That's above Lake 6 and historic Dunbar Lake and May Simmons Park. It's actually classified as parkland, and so you've got to go through a process in the state to even though it's going to still be used for a public use, to go from parkland to another use, you've got to have a public hearing. We did that last night. We had some feedback on positive and negative around that. I think as we went through and talked about the effort that we've gone through to look at potential pieces of property, I think everybody felt good about it. It was unanimously supported that location. So that's one of the 3. We're working on the other 2. We don't own land in north or south in those locations. So we're working with developers right now, and I would hope they would be a bit like a developer that might give land for a school, to have that in their neighborhood. And so I would say that maybe in the next 45 days is going to be focused on budget, but I would think by the end of September, early October, we would have those other locations located.
So there's no extra land near the park complex at 1585 in Milwaukee, potentially?
Not enough for what we need.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think there's a little land. I think Cooper ISD owns some of that land back to the northeast there. We're also going to lose a little land there with Loop 88 coming through on the but there's not. I may be wrong, and I don't want to say there's not enough land there, Rob. The part of the reason that's probably not been as much in our focus as we want it. We would like that south station to be a little more direct south and less southwest.
Right.
Because I think we feel like there'll be a date in the future, maybe 20 years from now, that there might be a west substation, which would have the city covered. Right now, it'll just be 3, but that's been the thought process. So a little more direct south is where the focus has been on looking.
How many for the substations has the police chief decided how many people he would have stationed at each substation? I mean, would it be, just for the sake of argument, like 20 officers or 50 officers, or has he not gotten that deep?
No, I think he has. I don't know. I don't know those numbers. It's the cities. I've seen the division of the city in thirds. It basically is line that goes north-south, and everything east of that will be supported by the substation we've just been talking about, and then another line that runs east-west, and you have the north and the south, and you'll have a chief, an assistant chief that'll be responsible for all three of those areas, and it's not extra head count. It's just that we'll be moving those folks from downtown out into these substations, and they'll be then the organization will have its structure down to your patrol officers.
Right, and then support staff and so on and so forth.
So you'll have some support staff out there. You'll keep most of your administrative functions downtown. You have your investigators downtown. You'll have the property crime, the folks that need to be in one location where there's some synergy for having them there together. But that'll be a much smaller. Remember that these substations are going to be about 11,000 square feet. Once we relieve that requirement, you'll have a much smaller administrative headquarters, 40 to 45,000 square feet.
And we have a texter this morning who's asking what about the effective tax rate for the next budget, which brings up an issue that I would like to address. The property values in Lubbock has gone up 7.5% on average, which is going to be a windfall for the city. Have you guys talked about that? Are you aware of? Is there a number that is going to that is being projected?
We'll see. We'll see. I think the appraisal district owes us a number. They've given us a preliminary number. It's not that high. I've not seen the. I think it's real close to 5%. Is the number that we'll see a number
5% increase over last year.
Yes, but that's total. So some of that's appraisal growth, and some of that's organic, like new investment. You remember that the state, this is a tough one. You guys know it. The state budget requires about a 7% per annum over the biennium, requires about a 7% appraisal growth to balance the budget. It's clearly in their numbers. So we know that's the fact. And then we have this real concern about appraisals. I found the appraisals to be a bit uneven this year. I know we talked when I was here previously about my personal appraisal. I protested my appraisal because it went up 20%. I lived in the house 20 years.
Yeah.
And so, but as long as we live in a state where the majority of our funding is on property tax, which I'm not I think there's maybe a more equitable way to do that. We're going to deal with this issue with appraisal creep or whatever you want to call it.
Well, I don't think we've ever in Lubbock had a 7.5% average increase in property values in 1 year.
I don't think we're going to have that this year when the dust settles. I can't imagine that's where it's going to be. I know we're not budgeting for anything like that.
Yeah. So you're not expecting a lot of extra.
No, I think
there'll
be growth, but there's growth that I hope there's growth. We need to fund we need to fund 10 more police officers. We need to fund more fire personnel. We've got to fund street maintenance. We've got a lot of needs that we have, and we need to pay cash for them. We don't need to finance that stuff.
Which brings up another question that arose yesterday on these substations.
Yes, sir.
One of the complaints was, or one of the issues was, that this is going to require more policemen to man, I suppose, these substations rather than the way we do it now.
No, it's not the case. We're not. You're not staffing to fund substations. You're staffing to fund the growth of the community.
So you said we need 10 more. We need to add 10 more.
We added 10 last year. I hope we can add 10 this year.
Of course, you lose some every year.
That's right.
That retire.
But we're talking about
saying
funding,
you need an increase.
We're talking about funding additional positions. We have. I think we're at 443 today. I think we went from 433 to 443 last year. I think 10's just a number in my head. We've not talked about it as a group. I would hope that we would be about that level. I think we need to keep up with our growth. I think you can't solve every problem by just funding police positions, but I do think it's something that helps the safety of our community.
You have to keep up with the growth of Lubbock.
You do, and and you want to do it. You don't want to finance that growth. I'm not sure you would finance salaries, but for years we financed street maintenance. Well, that just doesn't make sense. And we've paid for that with cash this year. We're going to pay for it with cash next year. Our council, last year we didn't buy any new police cars. We reutilized a bunch of those Crown Vics that we brought in for a little more than.
That's a police car.
And I think a lot of our young millennial age policemen want to drive those things. So we're trying to make common sense decisions.
I hadn't got used to these Mustangs yet. Okay, back with more after this. News Talk 95.1 FM 790 AM. This is KFYO Mornings. Dave King and Rob Snyder.
We were talking with Mayor Pope before we hit the break, and we've got a short segment here about the upcoming budget workshops and things. Yeah. You had mentioned last segment wanting to add potentially funding for 10 more police positions, some more firefighters as well. Are there any other parts of the budget that you would like to see an increase? Maybe more funding for street maintenance.
Yes, street maintenance for sure. We had this year. We're doing $7 million for street maintenance in cash. I think it's important to remind folks that for most of the last decade, we've split street maintenance between cash and debt. Mm-hmm. So that means we're financing street maintenance for 10 years, generally. And street maintenance doesn't last 10 years. I mean, you're 5 to 7 years, depending on weather, traffic, the type of structure you're actually doing maintenance to. So we got to pay cash for that, and I think you'll see us be able to increase that. I think you want us to continue. We'll want to pay as we go. Last year we financed 3 vehicles. We financed a ladder truck for the fire department that they'll keep for 15 or 20 years.
No, but that's a high dollar deal.
And we financed a couple of big pieces of equipment that we use at the landfill. Everything else, if we bought something new, we paid for it with cash. Mm-hmm. I think you'll see that this year. You were not financing computers. We're not. There's a number of small capital projects that we're paying cash for, and we're not. We just got to there was a habit at City Hall that you issued COs for everything and. Or for most everything, and a good example would be roofs, where you have to replace a roof. If you need to, when you're going to, when you're going to need that to do that deferred maintenance, you need to be saving for that, and so we've done several roofs this year. We paid cash for them. We've got a lot of assets that we've got to protect and maintain, and we should be doing that regularly. And a big part of the budget, remember, it's an $800 million budget plus $800 million plus. But the bulk of it, what we think of as the city services, are all in the general fund: police, fire, parks, library, streets, city hall, and that's only that's about 20% of the total budget, about $180 million. That's where the big decisions.
How much is going to overall debt service right now?
I can't tell you what all. I know inside the general fund that about 25% of the general fund goes to debt service, which is. Hinders our ability to provide.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's a lot. That you've got in the different operating business units, water, electricity, solid waste, stormwater. You've got ratepayer supported debt. I don't know exactly the number that goes. I can't call that number, but it's a lot. We have a
texture that says, regardless of appraisal values, is the council going to require property owners to pay more in property tax dollars than last year? That's from Chris.
We haven't made that decision yet, but my guess is you'll pay that the rate will stay the same, other than the fact it's going to go up a penny. We know it's going up a penny for the police substations. That's the decision we made back in December. So you'll see it go from 53 to 50.
It's what, $60 million is estimated for the
60, yes, yeah.
To build what, three
substations, a downtown administrative headquarters, the property room, crime lab, and update municipal court. Yeah, so
okay. You take a break?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and hit the weather and get the Pratt on Text this morning update, and then one final segment with Lubbock Mayor Dan Pope.
Okay. News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM. This is KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Rob Snyder this morning, filling in for Matt Martin. And we have the mayor for the final 2 minutes.
Yeah, let's Mayor Pope, I know there's a few things you wanted to mention about the budget and some of the other things that happened.
Well, let's talk about Citizens Tower. We were talking about it offline. We might as well talk about it because I know it's top of mind. So Citizens Tower is scheduled to be finished about this time next year. So late summer, move in the fall. So it's on schedule in that regard, and it's within the budget. In fact, it's a little under the budget as we speak. that total budget of $63 million, roughly right, plus or minus a little change, was to buy it, to abate it, to do the demolition, to buy, including demolishing the parking garage, to buy surface parking around it. It allowed us to buy a building that connects to it where we'll move municipal court. And then includes the complete redo. We'll have 160,000 square feet there. Okay, I'd love to talk about it in more detail. The budget. We start Monday, 3:00. We have budget workshops next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoon. Thursday, if we need one, you can watch it on City TV. If you were going to watch an hour's worth of city television all year long, you need to watch the first hour. The city manager will lay out the budget. We'll look back at this last year and look forward at next year. I think it's very much worth your time. Okay. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate being here.
Well, we appreciate it, and that's going to wrap it up, Mayor. We always appreciate it when you're here, and I think our audience, the information that we get from our audience, attests to that. Okay, it is 8:00, and we'll take a break and be back on the other side with more.